You're nothing but a burden, old man. This house isn't yours anymore. It's ours now. The words cut through me like a blade. In that moment, the years of sacrifice, the countless times I gave without hesitation, all twisted into cruel entitlement. What was once family had become exploitation, and the sanctuary I worked a lifetime to build was treated like spoils of conquest. That was the wound that changed everything, and the reason I finally chose to fight back. Before we dive into today's story, I recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. If you enjoy this video, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0 to let me know how I can make better content for you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. I had spent 40 years building bridges, both literal and figurative. My name is Thomas Reed, and after decades as a civil engineer, I finally stepped away from blueprints and deadlines. Retirement had come not with fanfare, but with a sigh of exhaustion and relief. With the money I had carefully saved, and the modest profit from selling my small stake in the firm I helped grow, I bought what I had always dreamed of, a villa by the water. The house sat in Naples, Florida, in a quiet bay where the tides lapped against the seawall like a steady heartbeat. The villa had a terracotta roof, cream stucco walls, and tall palm trees that lined the drive like sentinels. At $1.8 million, it was the most expensive purchase of my life, yet I considered it less a splurge than a sanctuary. The Homeowners Association enforced strict rules: no short-term rentals, no parties over 10 guests, no loud music after 10 p.m., and for me, that was a blessing. I wanted peace. I wanted the sound of the ocean to be my soundtrack, not the thumping bass of strangers' stereos. When I walked through the villa the first day, the Mediterranean arches and airy ceilings spoke of open horizons. The master suite had French doors that opened onto a balcony facing the bay. In the morning light, the water glittered like poured silver, and I thought, here, at last, I can rest. But rest was never so simple. 4 years earlier, my daughter Lauren had died from a brain aneurysm. She was 34, vibrant, and the center of my world. The phone call that took her from me still rings in my memory with unbearable clarity. Since then, silence had become both comfort and punishment. I kept her framed photograph on my desk, alongside a model of the first bridge I ever designed, a steel truss that had taken me 2 years to complete. The two objects, side by side, reminded me daily of what I had built and what I had lost. Lauren had been married to a man named Brandon Cole. I had never fully approved, though I kept my misgivings quiet for her sake. After she passed, Brandon leaned on me in ways that at first felt understandable. Tuition bills, mortgage struggles, credit card debt. He called them crises, and I stepped in, believing I was helping my daughter's husband through grief. But grief had hardened into expectation. Over 8 years, I had poured $265,000 into Brandon's life. MBA tuition, house down payments, car loans, emergency medical costs. Each time he promised repayment, but the money never returned. Instead, his requests became demands, couched in the language of family obligation. A year ago, he remarried a woman named Sierra, younger and image-conscious. I attended the wedding out of duty more than joy. From that point on, Brandon's voice on the phone carried less gratitude than entitlement, as though he were CEO of a corporation where I was the silent investor. My patience had been stretched thinner with every request. The villa, then, was my declaration of independence. For the first time in years, I was investing in myself, not in someone else's crisis. I had envisioned mornings tending a small herb garden, afternoons paddling on the bay, evenings with a glass of scotch on the balcony while gulls wheeled in the fading sun. My days would be filled with the quiet dignity of choices made for no one but me. Yet even as I unpacked boxes of books and positioned my favorite leather chair by the window, I felt a prickle of unease. Brandon had a way of sniffing out any improvement in my circumstances. He knew when I got a bonus, when I sold stock, when I made any move that suggested stability. He had always treated my resources as if they were part of his inheritance, not recognizing the line between generosity and ownership. I wondered how long it would be before he learned about this villa. The thought soured the air for a moment. I looked out across the bay, where the water shimmered gold beneath the sinking sun. I told myself I wouldn't let suspicion poison my peace. This was my home, purchased with my own sweat and patience. I was the sole name on the deed, the only one who could decide who came and went. I had learned as an engineer that every structure must be built on solid foundations. Weak supports, overlooked cracks, hidden stresses, those were the things that brought bridges down. The same rule applied to life. I had ignored the small fractures with Brandon for too long, convincing myself they would mend with time. Now, in this house, in this season of life, I promised myself something different. I would honor Lauren's memory, but I would not dishonor myself. I would remain kind, but I would not remain blind. The villa represented not just peace, but boundaries. And as I closed the French doors and listened to the surf against the seawall, I told myself I was ready to defend both. If you're still watching and this beginning already struck a nerve, comment number 1 below so I know you feel the weight of it. Now, let's move forward into the very first turn of the story. By the second week in the villa, I had begun to carve out a rhythm. Each morning I rose with the sun, opened the French doors of the master suite, and let the salt air fill my lungs. I set up bookshelves in the study, carefully stacking my engineering texts in order, and unwrapped the few family mementos I had brought from my old house. Life was simple: a cup of strong coffee, a walk by the dock, and hours spent arranging the home I intended to be my retreat. That afternoon, I was unpacking a box of crystal glasses when my phone buzzed across the counter. At first, I assumed it was an old colleague congratulating me on retirement. Instead, the screen lit with a group message thread I did not recognize. At the top, in bold letters, were the words, "Endless summer at our villa." My heart sank as I scrolled. The messages were filled with Brandon's familiar swagger. 14 of us confirmed, 10 days of sunshine, BYOB, poolside every night, he wrote. Names I didn't recognize, Trevor, Madison, a half dozen others, chimed in with thumbs up and laughing emojis. The word "our" made me stop. My villa was suddenly being presented as communal property, a prize to be shared among Brandon's friends. Before I could process it, the phone rang. Brandon's name glowed across the screen. I considered ignoring it, but answered, already bracing myself. "We're on our way down, Tom," he said, voice brimming with triumph. "Sierra's packed. The cars are loaded. We'll be there tonight." I set the glass on the counter with deliberate care. "Brandon, I haven't even finished moving in. This is my home, not a resort." He laughed, a sound that grated more than amused. "Come on, family helps family. You taught me that. The place is huge, and Lauren always dreamed of family gatherings here. Don't tell me you're planning to sit there alone." The mention of Lauren was a knife twist. He wielded her memory like a key to open any lock. I steadied my voice. "You can't just invite 14 people without asking me. You've got money, you've got space. End of story," he said. Then he hung up, as if the matter were settled. I stood frozen in the quiet kitchen, the surf outside suddenly sounding less like a lullaby and more like a warning drum. I turned back to the counter and saw my hands trembling around the stem of the glass. This villa had been my reward, my haven, yet in less than a minute Brandon had claimed it as his own stage. As I reached for the phone again, an email alert pinged. It was from the Homeowners Association. Subject line, "New guest vehicle registrations approved." My pulse quickened. 7 vehicles had been registered for my address under the name Brandon Cole, listed as co-resident. Each entry had the make and license plate of SUVs and sedans I didn't know. Brandon had already planned the invasion, going so far as to misrepresent himself to the security gate. I clicked through the details, my engineer's mind noting times, dates, and the pattern of entries. It was a scheme disguised as casual family bonding. Brandon hadn't asked, he had assumed. Worse, he had already arranged the logistics, confident I wouldn't or couldn't say no. I pushed away from the counter and paced to the study. Lauren's photo waited on the desk, her smile gentle, her eyes forever 34. I touched the silver frame. "What would you say, sweetheart?" I whispered. I knew the answer. She had begged me once to be patient with Brandon, to remember that grief wore people differently, but grief had become entitlement, and entitlement had grown into presumption. Through the bay window, I watched gulls wheel above the water. Their cries should have been soothing, but tonight they felt like omens. The horizon glowed orange with sunset, yet inside my chest, storm clouds gathered. My sanctuary was no longer secure. The villa, meant to symbolize peace, was about to become a battleground. I sat at the oak desk and opened my leather notebook, the one I used to jot details I didn't want to forget. I wrote down the time of Brandon's call, the wording of his claim, the number of guests he had promised, and the HOA email with its false designation. I recorded it all with the same precision I once used to log soil densities and steel loads, because if there was one thing I understood, it was this: structures fail when cracks go unmeasured. The evening closed in around me. The villa's white walls glowed in the last light, but the beauty was laced with dread. For the first time since buying the place, I felt less like an owner and more like a custodian awaiting an unwanted crowd. My dream had barely begun, and already it was under siege. I poured a glass of scotch, sat by the window, and let the truth settle like sediment. Brandon was coming, and he was not coming alone. If you're still watching and this twist has caught you off guard, comment number 2 below to let me know you're with me. Now, let's see what happens as the storm really begins to form. The sound reached me before the sight did. A low rumble on the narrow coastal road, a chorus of engines straining together, grew louder as the sun dipped toward the horizon. I stood at the bay window in my study, watching a plume of dust rise from the curve where the road met the gate. It looked less like a family visit and more like a convoy heading to a conquest. My stomach tightened. One by one, the vehicles rolled into my driveway. 2 black SUVs, a silver sedan, a pickup truck with coolers and folding chairs piled high in the bed. Doors flung open in quick succession, slamming against the late afternoon calm. Voices rose, laughter spilled into the air, and the quiet sanctuary I had built for myself fractured. Brandon was the first to step out, wearing mirrored sunglasses despite the shadows creeping across the drive. He carried himself with the swagger of a man arriving at property he considered his own. Sierra followed, already holding her phone up as she narrated into the camera. "Finally here at our villa, ready for the best week ever." My pulse spiked at the phrase, "our villa." It wasn't just sloppy language, it was possession. Before anyone could knock or ring the bell, I opened the front door. My plan was to set the tone, to meet them face to face, to assert control before chaos began. But the moment Brandon saw me, he grinned and strode forward, pushing past me into the foyer as though he had been expected. His eyes swept over the marble floors, the vaulted ceilings, the artwork I had just hung. He gave a low whistle, not of admiration, but of ownership, the way a man might look at a car he had just purchased. Behind him, Sierra twirled with her phone, narrating every detail for her followers. "Look at this kitchen. Look at this light. Wait until you see the view from the master suite." Without hesitation, she headed straight down the hallway, her heels clicking on the polished floor. "Stop," I said, louder than I intended. My voice echoed against the white walls. For a moment, the group behind her hesitated, but Sierra only laughed. "Don't be so serious, Thomas. This room will be perfect for my yoga videos. The lighting is amazing." Within minutes, the villa filled like a breached dam. Coolers landed on the counter, beer cans cracked open. 2 children I had never met ran shouting toward the pool deck, leaving wet footprints as they jumped in without changing clothes. Someone dragged a chair across the tile with a screech that made me wince. Strangers rearranged my furniture for better flow. The space I had curated with care was being stripped of its dignity before my eyes. I raised my hands, trying to command attention. "Everyone, please, this is my home. You can't just..." But my words were drowned out by the music someone had already cued from my sound system. A thumping beat filled the living room, shaking the glass panes in their frames. Brandon turned to me with a smirk. "Relax, Tom. It's a family reunion. This is what Lauren would have wanted." The invocation of her name was a dagger. I steadied myself, but the anger rose hot in my throat. "Don't use Lauren to justify this circus," I said. Brandon shrugged, as if I were being unreasonable. You're retired. You've got space. Stop acting like you're the victim here. Sierra reappeared from the hallway, carrying one of my towels around her shoulders. The master bath is gorgeous, she announced. We'll take that room. You'll hardly notice us. I stepped in front of her, my body tense, my voice sharp. That room is mine, off limits. Her eyes widened in mock surprise. Oh, come on. Don't be selfish. You should be happy this house is finally alive. The word selfish rattled me. Selfish, after years of sacrifice, after $250,000 funneled into their crises. I felt my hands tremble, not with weakness, but with fury. Brandon laid a hand on my shoulder, the gesture heavy and dismissive. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Tom. We'll get settled, then we'll talk. He gave me a patronizing pat, as though I were the guest, not the owner. I pulled back sharply. No, you can't stay. The group around us went quiet for the first time, surprise flickering across faces. But the silence lasted only a breath. Brandon laughed loudly, clapping his hands as if to break the tension. He's joking. Don't worry, folks. Tomorrow night, big party right here. Everyone's invited. Cheers erupted from the crowd, drowning out my protest. Plans were made over my head, menus, playlists, guest lists. My foyer became a marketplace of entitlement. I stood rooted, watching strangers invade the corners of my dream, my voice swallowed by their noise. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't a visit, it was a takeover. If you're still watching and this confrontation is pulling you in, comment number 3 below so I know you're following closely. Now let's uncover how the pressure keeps building. The morning sun slid through the slats of the blinds, painting lines of gold across the marble floor of my bedroom. I had barely slept. The thump of bass from the living room had continued long after midnight, and voices I didn't recognize carried up the hallway in bursts of laughter. My sanctuary had turned into a boarding house overnight. As I pulled on a shirt and stepped into the kitchen, the smell of frying bacon and stale beer hit me. 2 of Brandon's friends were standing at my stove as though it belonged to them, flipping eggs while opening cans of beer. I cleared my throat. Morning. I'd appreciate it if you didn't use my kitchen without asking. One of them turned, grinned lazily, and said, Relax, Pops. We're cooking for everyone. Grab a plate. The other just laughed, clinking his beer against the spatula like a toast. My jaw tightened. Brandon appeared from the hallway, hair messy, coffee mug in hand. You're up early, old man. We figured you'd sleep in. Everything okay? His tone was casual, like nothing was wrong, as if a dozen strangers hadn't invaded my home. I gestured at the chaos, the cluttered counters, the empty bottles, the greasy pans. This isn't okay. I didn't agree to host all of this. You need to tell everyone to pack up and go. Brandon smirked. Come on, we drove 4 hours to get here. We're not leaving after one night. Don't be so dramatic. You've got more space than you know what to do with. He took a sip of coffee and added, Besides, Sierra's already set up her yoga corner. She's getting great content with that ocean view. It's perfect. I could feel the vein in my temple pulsing. That's my master suite, Brandon. I told you it was off limits, he shrugged. She's just filming a few videos. No harm done. Before I could respond, Sierra's voice carried from the hallway. Honey, the lighting in the bathroom is even better. I'm going to do a live session later. Her laughter followed, high and self-satisfied. I pushed my chair back sharply. This is my house, not a resort. None of you belong here without my permission. I want everyone gone by this afternoon. Brandon's smile faded, replaced with the tight-lipped grin I'd come to recognize as his mask for defiance. We're already here, Tom. Let's not ruin things. Family deserves to be together. Don't you think Lauren would have loved this? The mention of my daughter landed like a blow to the chest. I steadied myself, forcing my voice not to crack. Don't use Lauren's name to excuse this disrespect. She never would have condoned it. But my words barely reached him. By then, others were streaming into the kitchen, grabbing plates, laughing, and treating my protest like background noise. Children ran barefoot across the polished floor, dripping water from an early dip in the pool. Someone spilled wine across the rug in the living room and laughed it off, tossing a towel over the stain as though it didn't matter. I tried one last effort. I clapped my hands and raised my voice. Everyone, listen. There are HOA rules here. No large gatherings, no parties, no loud music. If this continues, you're going to get me fined. You need to leave. A tall man I didn't know smirked as he lifted his beer. Rules are meant to be broken. Lighten up, Pops. Laughter followed his comment, and the tension in the room dissolved into mockery. I stood there, feeling invisible in my own home, the sound of my authority drowned in the din. I remembered Lauren's words, years ago, when she'd pleaded with me to be patient with Brandon. He means well, Dad. Just give him time. But patience had turned into a habit of surrender. Each check I wrote, each favor I granted, had eroded my boundaries until nothing remained. Brandon clapped at me on the back, his voice pitched just loud enough for the group to hear. Don't worry, folks. Tonight we're throwing a real party. More friends are coming, and this place will be the hottest spot in Naples. Cheers went up around the room, and my heart sank. I excused myself without another word, retreating down the hallway. The laughter followed me, echoing like a cruel soundtrack. Inside my study, I shut the door and turned the lock. Silence settled around me at last. I walked to the oak desk and pulled open the top drawer. There, neatly stacked, were the title deed, the HOA covenant, and my folder of financial documents. My fingers rested on the papers as though they were weapons I might need to draw. The realization was cold and sharp. Reasoning would never work with Brandon. This wasn't about hospitality, it was trespassing. And if I wanted to reclaim my home, I would need proof, authority, and perhaps the law on my side. If you're still watching and sensing how tense it's getting, comment number 4 below to let me know you're still here. Now let's move on to the moment where everything starts to tip over. By nightfall, my villa no longer resembled the sanctuary I had bought. It pulsed with noise. Colored lights blinked from the pool deck, music thumped through the walls, and laughter spilled across every room. Cars I had never seen before now crowded the driveway and lined the narrow street, their headlights flickering as new arrivals kept pouring in. What had begun as 14 people now looked closer to 25. I stepped out of my study and into a storm. The living room was packed shoulder to shoulder, strangers leaning against my furniture with drinks in hand, shouting over the beat. Sierra stood on the balcony filming herself with the bay as a backdrop, narrating for her followers about our luxury vacation. Brandon was in the center of it all, clapping a man on the back, barking orders as though he were the host. I raised my voice. Turn the music down. Everyone, this is not allowed here. The song dimmed for a brief moment, and all eyes turned to me. Brandon smirked, lifting his beer. Don't mind him, folks. The old man's just cranky. He's not used to fun. Laughter rolled through the room like a wave. My cheeks burned, but I stood my ground. This is my home, I said firmly. I didn't invite you. You all need to leave. Someone near the bar counter muttered, selfish old guy, and another chuckled. Then Brandon's voice rose above them all. Selfish? That's the word. Lauren would be ashamed of you, Tom. She believed in family. She wanted gatherings, laughter, community. Look at you, hoarding all this space for yourself, bitter and alone. The words cut deeper than I cared to admit. Around us, the crowd's mood shifted. They weren't ashamed but entertained, watching me as though I were the punchline to Brandon's performance. Then came the crack of glass. A wine goblet slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the tile, scarlet liquid pooling across the floor like blood. Behind me, 2 children sprinted in from the pool, dripping water across the limestone I had imported from Portugal. Their wet feet slapped against the floor, leaving dark stains on the pale stone. And then, the worst of it, Lauren's photo, the one I had placed gently on the mantel, was knocked over in the shuffle. The glass fractured across her smiling face. I froze. The world narrowed to that frame, lying broken on the floor. Something inside me snapped. My voice tore through the noise with a force I didn't recognize as my own. Enough! The music stopped mid-beat. Conversations died. Heads turned. You think this is your playground? You've disrespected me, my home, and my daughter's memory. My hand trembled as I pointed at Brandon. For years I've carried you, paid your tuition, your mortgage, your debts. Over $250,000, and you repay me by turning my home into a circus. No more. Every one of you. Get out. The silence that followed was heavy, almost tangible. A few of the guests shifted uncomfortably. Sierra looked stunned, clutching her phone with wide eyes. But Brandon recovered quickly, his smirk curling back into place. He stepped toward me, lowering his voice so only I could hear, though the menace was clear in every syllable. Think carefully, Tom. Some relationships can't be repaired once you break them. You're going to regret this. You'll end up alone, and when that happens, don't expect anyone to pick up the phone. His breath smelled of alcohol, his eyes glinting with the kin of confidence that came from years of unchecked entitlement. He expected me to fold, to retreat like I always had. But something in me had shifted. Looking around at the strangers filling my living room, I realized there was nothing here worth preserving. Whatever bond had existed between us had long since been warped beyond recognition. I stepped back, meeting his gaze with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. You're right about one thing, Brandon, I said evenly. Some things can't be repaired. And this is one of them. I turned without waiting for his response, walking deliberately down the hallway. Behind me, voices rose again, uncertain, agitated. Brandon called after me, trying to reassert his authority, but I no longer listened. I entered my study, closed the door, and turned the lock with a decisive click. The room was quiet, lit only by the desk lamp. I opened the drawer where my documents lay neatly stacked. The title deed, the HOA bylaws, the folder of financial records. My hand hovered for a moment, then reached for the phone. My reflection in the darkened window looked older, harder, but resolute. I dialed 3 numbers, 911. The dispatcher's calm voice steadied my nerves. 911, what's your emergency? There are people in my home, I said, my voice strong though my heart pounded. They came without permission and refused to leave. I need police assistance. As I spoke, fists hammered on the study door, voices shouting my name, demanding I come out. I held the phone tighter. Yes, I told the dispatcher. This is my legal residence. I can provide documentation. For the first time that evening, I felt control returning, not through shouting or pleading, but through action. My villa might be under siege, but I had taken the first step to reclaim it. The door rattled against its frame as fists pounded in rhythm. Voices shouted through the wood, overlapping, angry, mocking, pleading. Brandon's tone rose above the rest, slick with false calm. Come on, Tom. Don't make this worse than it is. Open up, and let's talk like adults. No need to involve outsiders. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. The dispatcher's voice was steady, professional. Sir, officers are en route. Estimated arrival 15 minutes. Stay where you are. Can you confirm again that this is your residence? Yes, I answered, forcing my voice to remain firm despite the thud of fists on the door. I'm the homeowner. I have the deed right here. Good, she replied. Remain safe, remain calm. Outside, the crowd's tone shifted. Jessica, the new wife Sierra, squealed, "He's losing it! He's calling the cops on his own family." Another voice, one of Brandon's friends, added, "Crazy old man. Doesn't even know what he's doing." Laughter followed, cruel and dismissive. My phone buzzed with a flood of texts. Brandon first. Emily would never forgive you. You're tearing this family apart. You'll die alone, and that's on you. Then Sierra. A selfie of her with mascara streaks running down her cheeks, captioned, "Do you feel good embarrassing me like this?" Another guest chimed in, "We're just here to have fun. You've lost your mind." The words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. For years, family had been the one thread keeping me tethered, even when that family had been a constant drain. Now I was the villain in their story, the selfish man, the bitter recluse. For a moment, my hand hovered near the lock. Maybe if I opened the door, let them stay, endured a few more days of chaos, I could preserve what little remained of connection. But then my eyes landed on the photo of Lauren. The cracked glass still lay across her smile, the fracture splitting her face in two. That frame had survived every move, every house, every office. Now it bore the mark of last night's invasion. A memory of my daughter, my only child, disrespected, not by accident but by entitlement. The doubt drained from me, replaced with clarity sharp as steel. I whispered into the stillness of the study, "No more." I thought of the years, the $45,000 tuition, the $60,000 down payment, the $85,000 in medical bills. Each time I had told myself it was the last. Each time I had written another check. And each time, gratitude had dwindled further until only demands remained. Brandon hadn't come here to visit. He had come to conquer. The fists against the door grew weaker, replaced by urgent whispers. "He actually called them," someone hissed. "Cops are coming," another voice. "We should get out before this gets ugly." But Brandon, stubborn as ever, barked, "He's bluffing. He wouldn't dare. He'll cave like always." Then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of sirens carried on the wind, the rhythm of desperation. Red and blue lights flickered against the night sky in the distance, growing brighter with each second. Inside the study, my heartbeat slowed. My fear hadn't vanished. It pulsed beneath my skin, hot and electric, but something else had taken its place. Resolve. For the first time in years, I was not negotiating, not conceding, not surrendering. I had drawn a line, and this time, I would not step back. The dispatcher spoke again. "Officers are arriving now, sir. Do not open the door until they identify themselves." I exhaled, long and steady. "Thank you." The noise outside shifted from arrogance to panic. Footsteps scattered across the hallway. Someone cursed. Another pleaded with Brandon to leave, but his voice cut through, frantic now, cracking at the edges. "Stay put! He's bluffing. He won't go through with it." But I had gone through with it. I had made the choice. Not for revenge, not for pride, but for survival, for peace, for dignity, for the right to call my home mine. The sirens grew louder until they were no longer distant but pressing against the windows, rattling the glass with their nearness. Through the thin crack of the blinds, I caught the reflection of flashing lights painting the palm trees in strobing colors. The cavalry had arrived. I rested my hand on the deed lying across the desk, my name etched in black ink. Proof, authority, ownership, my shield against years of manipulation. The weight of that paper was heavier than steel in that moment. And as the pounding at my door fell silent, replaced by the firm, professional knock of law enforcement, I knew the battle for my villa was about to turn. If you're still watching and the choice ahead feels impossible, comment number 5 below so I know you're with me. Now, let's see which path is taken and what it costs. The pounding on my study door stopped suddenly, replaced by a sharp, authoritative knock at the front of the villa. A commanding voice carried through the chaos. "Police department, open the door." The volume of the party collapsed like a punctured balloon. Whispers darted through the hallway, feet scurried, and music snapped off mid-beat. Brandon's voice rose, strained but still trying for confidence. "Everyone stay calm. I'll handle this." I unlocked my study and stepped into the foyer just as Brandon swung the front door open. 2 officers entered, one older with gray at his temples, the other younger but sharp-eyed. Their presence immediately shifted the atmosphere. The strangers who had mocked me only minutes ago now looked uneasy, clutching drinks they no longer wanted. "Good evening," the older officer said. "We received a call about trespassing." "Who's the homeowner?" "I am," I said, stepping forward with the deed in my hand. My voice was steadier than I expected. "Thomas Harding, this is my property." Brandon cut in quickly. "Officers, it's just a misunderstanding. Tom's been under a lot of stress since retirement. He invited us. He just doesn't remember. We're family." His smile was practiced, his tone oily with false reason. Sierra stepped up beside him, mascara streaked across her face, clutching tissues as though she were on stage. "He yelled at us. He embarrassed me in front of everyone. We just wanted to spend time together. She dabbed at her eyes and added, "He's not well." The younger officer scanned the room, taking in the beer cans, the luggage scattered across the floor, and the crowd of unfamiliar faces. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "family or not, none of this explains why so many people are here without the homeowner's consent." The older officer gestured toward me. "Mr. Harding, may we see proof?" I handed over the deed and the HOA papers I had pulled earlier. He read carefully, nodding as he examined the official seals. "This property is registered to you alone, sir." "Yes, I bought it last month. No co-owners." That simple confirmation shifted the air entirely. Brandon's confident smirk cracked. A few of his friends exchanged nervous glances. One of them muttered, "Man, I told you this was a bad idea," before slipping toward the door. The officer returned the documents. "Thank you, Mr. Harding. For the record, the homeowner has the legal right to determine who is allowed here. Anyone who refuses to leave will be arrested for trespassing." The statement landed like a hammer. Brandon's face flushed red. "You can't be serious. He's throwing out his own family. That's not right." The younger officer's expression didn't change. "Sir, family ties don't override property rights. You have 15 minutes to gather your belongings and vacate." A ripple of movement spread through the group. Suitcases were zipped, bottles abandoned, towels snatched from the pool deck. Some of the guests fled quickly, heads down, mumbling apologies. Others grumbled, but the authority in the officers' voices left little room for argument. Sierra stormed toward the bedroom, shouting over her shoulder, "You'll regret this, Tom. Everyone will know what kind of man you are." Her words echoed, shrill and bitter, as she stuffed clothes into her designer bag. Brandon lingered, his jaw tight, his hands curled into fists. He tried one last tactic, stepping close to me. "You think this is over? I'll make sure people see the truth about you. You'll be the villain, not me." The older officer moved between us, his voice firm. "Sir, back away. Collect your things and leave now." For the first time all night, Brandon looked powerless. He grabbed his bag roughly, muttered something under his breath, and stomped toward the SUV. Minutes later, the last car pulled out of the driveway. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the empty space where the crowd had stood. The younger officer handed me a slip of paper with a case number. "If they return without permission, call us immediately. Tonight establishes a record. They have no claim here." I nodded, gripping the paper like a lifeline. "Thank you." When the officers left, silence settled over the villa. Not the peaceful silence I had once dreamed of, but a heavy, exhausted quiet. I walked slowly through the house, surveying the damage. Beer stains marred the marble counters. Sand coated the floor near the pool entrance. A wine stain spread dark across the rug. And on the mantel, Lauren's photo lay where I had placed it earlier, the glass still cracked across her smile. Relief washed through me. I had regained control, but it mingled with weariness. My sanctuary was mine again, yet hollow. I knew tonight was only the beginning. Brandon wouldn't let it end here. His threats, Sierra's fury, the humiliation they felt, all of it would fester. Still, for now, the house was empty. The silence, though heavy, belonged to me. And that, I realized as I locked the door behind the departing officers, was enough for tonight. The morning light crept into the villa like an unwelcome guest, exposing every scar from the night before. Beer cans littered the marble counters, leaving sticky rings where condensation had pooled. A wine stain bled dark and ugly into the fibers of my living room rug. Chairs were pushed at odd angles, cushions tossed aside as if looters had rummaged through my belongings. My dream home looked less like a sanctuary and more like a crime scene. I moved through the wreckage in silence, picking up cans, righting furniture, and gathering towels abandoned across the floor. Each act of cleaning felt heavier than it should have, as though I was scrubbing away not just the mess, but years of indulgence that had led me here. For years, I had told myself patience was kindness, that giving Brandon chance after chance honored Lauren's memory. But what had it really done? It had built this pattern, brick by brick, until entitlement had grown into full-scale invasion. I paused at the mantel, where Lauren's photo still rested in its fractured frame. The glass was jagged, her smile broken down the middle. I traced the edge of the crack with my thumb and whispered, "I should have stopped this years ago." The knock at the door startled me. It wasn't harsh like last night, but tentative, curious. I opened it to find my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, standing on the porch. She was small and sharp-eyed, her gray hair pulled into a bun. "I saw the police cars," she said without preamble. "Are you all right, Thomas?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just had some unexpected company." Her gaze flicked past me into the villa, taking in the disarray. She shook her head. "You did the right thing calling the police. Folks around here talk, you know. Brandon's been telling anyone who will listen that you threw him and his wife out. But people also saw the commotion. They know something wasn't right." Her words were both comforting and unsettling. I thanked her and watched her walk away, her figure small against the bright Florida sun. The neighbors had noticed. The story was already spreading. When I finally checked my phone, the reality hit harder. Dozens of notifications buzzed across the screen. Brandon had wasted no time. His post sat at the top of my feed. My own father-in-law kicked us out of his house last night. Called the police on family. After everything we've been through, this is how he treats us. Lauren would be heartbroken. Attached was a photo of Sierra, her mascara smeared, eyes red as though she had just survived a tragedy. The comments were a flood of sympathy. "That's so cruel. Money changes people. Poor Sierra. Stay strong." Friends from Lauren's college years chimed in, saying they couldn't believe I'd act this way. Old colleagues I hadn't spoken to in years left vague remarks about losing touch with values. Brandon had done what he always did, grabbed control of the narrative first. My chest tightened as I scrolled. Each word felt like a stone hurled at me. For a moment, I nearly let despair creep in. They were turning me into the villain. But then something shifted. I set the phone down and walked into my study. The oak filing cabinet stood against the wall, its drawers neat and labeled, an engineer's habit. I pulled the top one open and rifled through the folders until I found the one marked Family Assistance. The weight of it in my hands was surprising. Inside were years of records, bank transfers, tuition payments, receipts for medical bills, copies of checks I had written when Brandon claimed his car needed repairs, or when his mortgage payment was late. I spread them across the desk in chronological order. The numbers told a story far more damning than Brandon's social media tears. $45,000 for tuition, $60,000 for a down payment, tens of thousands more for credit cards, bills, and medical costs. In total, nearly $300,000 over 6 years, all carefully documented, every date and signature intact. I stared at the neat columns of figures, the undeniable proof of what my patience had cost me. Brandon had built his sob story on the illusion of neglect, but the truth was here in black and white. He hadn't been abandoned. He had been sustained, carried, rescued again and again, until he believed it was his right. The anger that had burned so hot last night cooled into something steadier, sharper. This wasn't about shouting or defending myself online. It was about evidence, about facts, about showing the world who had truly been betrayed. My career had taught me one lesson above all. Every problem had a solution if you approached it systematically. I closed the folder and tapped it against the desk. The tools for my defense, for my counterattack, were already here. Brandon had chosen the battlefield of public opinion. I would bring the fight to the place where evidence mattered, the law, the truth, the cold precision of records that could not be spun. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a strange kind of calm. The villa was still scarred, the rug still stained, the photo frame still broken, but in my hands lay the power to turn the story. If you're still watching and the search for answers resonates with you, comment number 6 below to let me know you're still here. Now, let's move on and witness the plan to fight back taking shape. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper, a sharp contrast to the salt air I was used to at the villa. I walked through its heavy wooden doors with my attorney by my side, briefcase in hand, filled with the evidence I had compiled over years. Bank transfers, canceled checks, and receipts neatly organized like blueprints for a case I had never expected to build. Across the hallway, Brandon sat slumped on a bench, his shoulders rounded, his once cocky posture collapsed. A public defender muttered to him in low tones, flipping through a thin folder that looked pitiful next to the fortress of documentation we carried. Sierra wasn't beside him this time. Her dramatic tears and staged photographs were useless here. The courtroom was not a stage. It was a place for facts. When the hearing began, the judge looked over the case file with deliberate care. My attorney laid out the evidence step by step. Tuition payments, mortgage bailouts, credit card rescues, even the down payment on the house Brandon now claimed as his own. Screenshots of his social media posts were displayed, his pleas for sympathy alongside photos of designer clothes and luxury dinners. The judge's expression hardened. "Mr. Miller," she said, "your narrative does not align with the financial record. You have portrayed yourself as abandoned, but the evidence shows you have benefited from years of systematic support. This constitutes exploitation." Brandon's mouth opened as if to protest, but no words came. His defender placed a hand on his arm, urging silence. The weight of truth was too heavy to counter. By midday, a settlement was on the table. Brandon would repay a portion of what he owed, $150,000 over several years. More importantly, he would issue a public retraction of his defamatory statements and agree to cease any further harassment. Failure to comply would result in asset seizure and additional penalties. I considered it carefully. A part of me wanted more, wanted to see him humbled further, wanted to squeeze every dollar from him until he understood the cost of betrayal. But vengeance would not give me back the years or the peace I had lost. What I wanted now was closure, and accountability was enough. "I accept," I told the judge. My voice carried calm, not triumph. When the gavel struck, the matter was sealed. Brandon would carry the weight of his own actions, and I no longer had to carry him. Back at the villa, the sea breeze was cool against my face as I sat on the deck. The house was still scarred from their invasion. Some stains would never quite come out. But it was quiet. My phone buzzed with messages, apologies from neighbors, colleagues, and even Lauren's old friends who admitted they had been too quick to believe Brandon's lies. One by one, the pieces of my reputation were restored. I poured a glass of wine and carried it to the railing. The horizon stretched endlessly, the ocean rolling with a rhythm older than all my worries. Beside me on the table sat Lauren's photo, now in a new frame. I raised the glass toward her smile. "I did it, sweetheart," I whispered. "I learned the difference between being generous and being taken for granted." The waves crashed softly against the shore, carrying away the last echoes of chaos. For the first time in years, the villa was mine, not just in deed, but in spirit. Peace, hard-earned and fragile, had finally come home. The days following the court's decision slipped into a rhythm I had almost forgotten, a rhythm of quiet mornings and unbroken evenings. The villa, once echoing with voices that did not belong, was mine again. Each sunrise spilling across the Atlantic seemed to paint the walls with forgiveness. I brewed my coffee without interruption, sat on the deck without fear of someone barging through the door, and let the sound of the waves fill the silence I had fought so hard to reclaim. The house still bore marks of the ordeal. A faint stain on the rug, a scuff along the marble entryway, the ghost of laughter that once mocked me in my own living room. Yet even those scars began to feel less like wounds and more like reminders, lessons etched into stone and fabric. They whispered, "You endured. You stood your ground." I thought often about generosity. For most of my life, I had mistaken it for surrender. Writing checks, covering debts, swallowing indignities. It had all felt like love, or at least duty. Lauren had encouraged me to be patient, and I had taken that to mean limitless tolerance. But kindness without boundaries is not kindness. It is permission. And permission had nearly cost me my peace, my home, and perhaps even my dignity. Family, I realized, is not measured by blood alone. Some of Lauren's cousins, people I hadn't spoken to in years, reached out after the settlement. They told me they admired what I had done, that they wished they had spoken up sooner about Brandon's arrogance. Their support was genuine, built not on obligation, but on respect. At the same time, a few others distanced themselves, still clinging to Brandon's sob story. I no longer chased their approval. Respect cannot be begged. It must be earned mutually. Neighbors who had once eyed me with suspicion now nodded warmly when we crossed paths. Some even apologized for doubting me when Brandon's lies first surfaced online. The forced retraction he posted had stripped the mask from his narrative, and the truth had spread quickly. My reputation, though bruised, was healing. People spoke of courage now, not cruelty. One evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and carried it to the deck. Lauren's photo sat beside me in its new frame, unmarred by cracks. The sea stretched endlessly, calm under the fading light. I raised my glass toward her smile. "I finally understand," I said softly. "Generosity must be tempered with wisdom. You taught me to be kind, but you never asked me to be blind." As if the universe wished to punctuate the moment, my phone buzzed on the table. It was an email from my attorney. The subject line read, "Confirmation of first payment." Brandon had transferred the first installment of his restitution, proof that the settlement was not just words on paper, but reality unfolding. A debt finally acknowledged, however reluctantly. I set the phone down and let the news settle over me like a warm tide. This wasn't triumph. It wasn't about watching him squirm or seeing him fall. It was about balance restored, about proof that standing firm, even late in life, could still bring justice. The waves rolled steady against the shore, erasing footprints, smoothing the sand for a new day. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, letting the breeze carry away the last echoes of Brandon's threats. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next crisis or preparing for the next demand. I was living, fully and freely, in the home I had dreamed of. If there was a message to anyone who cared to hear it, it was this. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are the foundation of respect. Without them, generosity curdles into exploitation. With them, kindness flourishes into something lasting, something true. I smiled into the dusk, the ocean endless before me. My story was no longer one of being taken advantage of. It was one of reclaiming, of learning, of finally standing tall. And as the last light slipped beneath the horizon, I felt not bitterness, but hope, pure and uncompromised. In the quiet that follows any storm, there is always space for reflection. Life has a way of testing the strength of our boundaries, pressing us to choose between preserving peace or surrendering to the demands of others. It is tempting to believe that endless giving is the highest form of love, that sacrifice without limit is the truest measure of kindness. Yet, the truth is far more complex. Generosity without wisdom can become a trap, turning noble intentions into chains of exploitation. The lesson is not that we should close our hearts, but that open hearts must be protected by firm lines. Boundaries are not signs of coldness. They are the structure that allows love, respect, and dignity to survive. Without them, even the most sincere compassion can be twisted into obligation, and relationships lose their balance. With them, trust is rebuilt on fairness, and kindness becomes sustainable. Reputation and peace are fragile things. They can be attacked with lies, distorted by appearances, and threatened by those who see only their own gain. But when one chooses truth, evidence, and integrity over manipulation, stability eventually returns. Lies may spread quickly, but they cannot endure the weight of facts. The path to vindication is rarely loud. It is deliberate, patient, and unwavering. In the end, true freedom is not found in how much we give, but in the wisdom of when to say no. Protecting one's dignity is not selfishness. It is the foundation of meaningful connection. Real strength lies not in enduring exploitation, but in standing firm against it. And from that strength flows a deeper kind of peace, the kind that restores hope, renews respect, and leaves space for tomorrow's possibilities. These lessons are meant to inspire you to live fully and authentically. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Take a moment to reflect and share one thing you've learned and plan to apply in your own life. Let's support each other on this journey toward embracing these truths. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment with 1. If not, feel free to comment with 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life on your own terms.